Hi, folks. Hopefully you participated in one of our earlier trainings on the filibuster and why we need to engage aggressively to fire the filibuster and move forward to advance the interests of not just progressives, but of all Americans. My name is Brittany Baxter. I'm the Training and Movement Building Coordinator at the Democracy Initiative, and today I am honored to have the good Reverend Dr. Stephanie Spalding, the founder of the Truth and Conciliation Commission, here with us. So, go ahead. I'm so sorry.
I just said hello. It's so great to be with you. It's just been an amazing day, and it is definitely a conversation that we need to keep having until the filibuster is fired.
Amen. Amen. So, folks, here's how it's going to work today. I'm going to start off asking the good Reverend Doctor some questions, and then we will start taking questions from the audience. So please type them in the chat as you think of them. We have a few here already set up, but let's dive in. This is the time to ask any question that you have about all things filibuster. But I'm going to start because I too have questions. First, I would just if you could just start with just a kind of a brief background of your organization, why you founded it, and then just tell us a little bit about how the filibuster plays into the work that you're doing.
Awesome. So the name of our organization is the Truth and Conciliation Commission. And for those who are into racial justice work, anti-racism work, a lot of us are familiar with Truth and Reconciliation projects. South Africa was the first Truth and Reconciliation commission that was done after the fall of apartheid. What is different about the United States and what we recognize here, and I'll just point out that the United States as a nation has never done anything like this. And what is different is the reality that reconciliation, the language, the term itself, means that there's an agreement, there was an agreement that we can go back to, right? If you think about relationships, you think about a marriage, trying to reconcile that relationship, at one point there was an agreement. In the United States, when it comes to racial justice, when it comes to white racial violence, there has never been an agreement. So our first truth is to acknowledge that the very foundation of the United States is in white racial violence. And if we're going to unearth that, if we're going to change the fruit that is being produced, then we have to dig in the soil and deal with that reality of who we are as a nation in order to become who we want to be. So that is the focus of the work of the Truth and Conciliation Commission. We are calling for a federal commission from a grassroots space, right? We are also saying that we don't have to wait for Congress to give us a commission. We can begin to do this work in and of ourselves. So when we talk about the filibuster, we really are talking about a broken democracy. Most people think that we have been in a democracy forever. And the reality is we live in a democratic republic that has not been so democratic until after the Civil Rights Voting Act was passed, right? Because democracy means that the majority of people get to play and have access to the governance that we are experiencing. But we have a broken democracy right now. As we think about the filibuster, you really have minority control governing the United States. And people don't recognize that because they're like, I go to the polls every midterm election. I go to the polls every 4 years and elect a president. But what happens after we elect individuals and the power that gets distributed in Congress is so skewed that it really is controlled by a minority, and the Senate is part of that problem.
Wow, thank you so much for that. That's really powerful work that you're doing, and it's absolutely necessary, right? As I said before in our other trainings, in our other sessions, the Democracy Initiative is positioned to apply a race class analysis to democracy work, which traditionally is a white male space. Because the folks who are most impacted by the way our democracy is structured these days, from its inception, have not been white men. It is folks who are farthest removed from that reality, who are the most impacted, who suffer the most, and who are excluded. And so our work is to ensure that we are pulling in those folks and shaping strategy around, and engaging intentionally folks who have not been able to participate, because they're the ones who tell us how the democracy we're trying to create, or not trying to, we are fighting to achieve, can be created and what needs to be included. So I have another question for you. This is an incredible question from a participant in our introductory training. So these anti-voter laws and et cetera must be considered unconstitutional at some point. If that's the case, then aren't these authors betraying the oath of office they swore to protect the Constitution? And if so, can't they be charged with that betrayal and then removed from office?
That is a great question. And if you are asking me as just a regular citizen, absolutely. They are betraying their oath of office. And we're seeing it not just at the state level, but at the federal level. However, in order for them to be called on the carpet, we have to have leaders in Congress at, again, whether it's the state legislature or in Congress, we have to have leaders to actually call them on that. We saw the battle for censure that happened after January 6th, but we are now also looking at the spin that the GOP is putting on the narrative of January 6th and saying that these were just, everyday random tourists. And if you didn't know that video was the video that it was, then it could have just been any day in Washington, D.C. So you have actually elected officials who are not just betraying what the Constitution represents, they are betraying the American trust by espousing this language. But we need individuals who have the leadership and the courage to actually call them out on it and then to hold them accountable. Otherwise, we're just frustrated citizens sitting at home on our couch, looking at our Zoom, looking at our 24/7 cable network news, being angry because we're not in that position to call them and hold them accountable.
Right. That's a really powerful statement. And it's very disempowering to feel as if you're helpless in this and you have no control over how to move these folks. But we in the progressive movement know that all it takes is a little bit of people power to put pressure on these folks. So you mentioned leaders willing to stand up. So I have a question about who we should be pressuring more around the ending the filibuster. Is it Congressmember Schumer from New York, or is it Congressmember Sinema and Congressmember Manchin from respectively Arizona and West Virginia?
Every last one of them. Every last one of them needs to be pressured to actually do their job. And that's what the filibuster represents. This rule that disallows senators to actually vote, right? So people are in this position getting paid almost $200,000 a year by taxpayers to not take a vote. We sent you to office to literally just vote. So we need to be pressuring everyone. I say no sleep till Brooklyn, right? Just everybody needs to know how frustrated we are as the American populace with senators not doing their job. And so Chuck Schumer could handle this today if he desired. He could literally call a session tomorrow on a Sunday and handle this and end the filibuster. But again, I say no one gets any sleep until we fire the filibuster.
I love it and I agree. I think we need to be making sure that if we don't have any justice, they don't have no peace.
Yes.
Right? And I love that, right? It really is just like putting pressure where you can, everywhere you can, to make it unbearable for them to continue to function in this system that doesn't serve us. So I have another question for you. Is there a specific Senate committee that should be pressured to holding hearings and moving the rule to eliminate the filibuster?
I mean, again, if we wanted to look at a committee, we could look at the Rules Committee, but you don't have to. Chuck Schumer could walk into the Senate today and do away with the filibuster. It's exactly what Mitch McConnell did. And I don't understand. I'm not going to say anything sexist or gendered, but I don't understand what's holding him back, right? From actually doing the job that he is not only elected by his constituents, but empowered by the party to do. So again, it doesn't even have to go through committee. The majority leader can do this by a simple majority vote.
Thank you so much. So can you just explain for folks how Mitch McConnell, could you just explain and give a bit of context for how Mitch McConnell weaponized the filibuster during his, what I like to call his reign of terror, right? From the 90s to until he was turned into minority leader by the people last year.
So,
thank you, Georgia.
Thank you, Georgia. Yes. And thank you, Black and brown folks who organized and stayed in those lines in Georgia. So again, the idea is that if a piece of legislation is coming forth to the Senate that nobody wants to, the filibuster creates the space where there can be endless debate so that the question is never called for anyone to actually vote on it. Nobody wants to deal with the frustration of endless debate, right? So they just assume in the Senate that if you do not already have 60 votes on lock, that we're not even going to advance this bill. What happens is that in these last congressional sessions, less than 1% of legislation actually was voted on. So it was just bills that people were writing, passing in the House that never even came out of committee or to the floor from the Senate because people assumed there's not 60 senators who's going to vote for it. We don't even have to talk about it. And what Mitch McConnell did was to pick and choose when to eliminate the power of the filibuster. So when it came time to advance a judge, it was like, there's no need to, we could do that by simple majority vote because we want to have in place the kind of judges that are going to represent our conservative values and that is going to skew the courts. So he did away with that, with the filibuster. When it came to legislation that impacted Black and brown people, like criminal justice reform, voting legislation to protect the expansion of the enfranchisement, he was just like, nope, we have to have a super majority in order to get to that, to even bring it to the floor. So there was just bills on top of bills on top of bills that sat on his desk and he wouldn't even consider them. He would not even allow the Senate to vote on them. And so that's how he weaponized the filibuster and weaponized his power in the Senate over his reign of terror.
So thank you for mentioning that because it brings me to a question about a bill named after one of the very few electeds that I hold in very high regard, the late great John Lewis. And so I'm going to just read some stats out for folks. So 70% of Americans support the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act, H.R. 4, including a majority of Republican voters. But 41 senators representing 21% of voters can block it with a filibuster. Why hasn't there been any action from the Senate Majority Leader, who's now Chuck Schumer, to move that forward? And what does that mean for us as we continue to fight to pass H.R. 1, H.R. 4, and H.R. 51, which is to make D.C., to give D.C. statehood?
So I'm just going to speak from my own organizing activist political perspective of why Chuck Schumer has not moved in this way, or many Democrats previously, because power is so seductive. And what ends up happening is that we get these individuals in office that become so enamored by the power that they have been granted that they don't to actually use the power that they have. What does that mean? So most are worried about, am I going to get reelected if I do this, right? Or what is this going to look like for the dynamics of the party if I do this? And unfortunately, on the Democratic side, we have individuals who believe in the idea of diplomacy winning out. And in a normal society that advances civics and civility, I would encourage diplomacy. But we're dealing with a GOP that does not give a dang about anything and has demonstrated that they will forego all forms of ethics, and reality and truth in order to advance their agenda. So you're not playing with rational beings. You're not playing with people who value logic and reason and want to actually civilly work out being on different sides of a perspective or of an issue. And so these individuals like Chuck Schumer haven't done anything because they don't know who they're playing with. And they keep, focusing on this, but in the future, it will get better. And they just keep getting played year after year. And I am ready for individuals like Cori Bush to be leaders and, having the power that these people are not utilizing in their respective roles.
Thank you so much for saying that, because I do think, I think that there is a disconnect in this idea of being a statesman as opposed to recognizing that the party that we're facing now is not the party of 30, 40 years ago, right? It is not conservative values. It is about sustaining power and holding on to it as this country's demographic shift, which is like fostering this fear of like the death of whiteness, right? Of the death of white power as we know it, which we recognize that is not necessarily going to happen in the way they think it is. So that is a
say that I have done work on Christian nationalism and have spoken about Christian nationalism. And the thing that shocked me the most, the revelation that has shocked me the most is, unfortunately, progressives think that they're radical and they get gaslit in media as radical. The reality is this current GOP is truly radical, and they are utilizing the language and the practice and even the platform of Malcolm X by any means necessary, better than any progressive agenda group, organization ever. And they are really doing the radical work in the most obtuse and demeaning way to our democracy.
Yeah, wow. Oof. Ooh, that's powerful. That is so powerful. My next question is, how do we move forward, right? Because I think that like with the filibuster, firing the filibuster is not a cure-all, but how much of an impact would firing the filibuster actually mean for Senate governance and our ability to advance issues that matter to the American people?
So firing the filibuster is an absolute must, and it has to happen today as opposed to tomorrow. Like, it has to happen now. We keep talking about this allure of power and positioning for years to come. Unfortunately, what Democrats believe is that they will make it to midterms, that they will make it another year and a half, and to regain or reclaim. We will not be in this position again when it comes to the next midterm election cycle if we do not move past the filibuster right now. We are in a place that we have to run legislate. We have the ball. You got to run it. You have to run this ball all the way through to to the goal, because we're not going to have it again. We're not going to have it again. So for those who are organizing, please continue to call on your legislators, especially in the Senate, and to call on every last one of those legislators. Support those who have shifted their position. We didn't even have at the start of this 100-day term for Biden, it wasn't even 40 plus senators who were openly talking about eliminating the filibuster. But there are so many now on board because they realize how much you care about eliminating the filibuster. So call on your representative, your senators, call on Chuck Schumer and make sure that we are sending a message that Americans, regardless of party, want their legislators to get up every day and do their jobs.
Thank you. Thank you. I want to go back to a question, to a response that you posed to a question I asked about Schumer not moving in the same way that McConnell did. Because I do think that we do face this. One of the barriers that we face as progressives is that we do have a moral compass, at least like a general direction that we try to move in. And so there are some limitations to what we're willing to do. And so how could we push him to navigate in that way without creating another Mitch McConnell? Is it possible?
I'll say this. When I was in undergrad, I'm a member of one of the Divine Nine sororities, but when I was in undergrad, I had so much criticism about what I saw on my campus at the time. And I remember an elder fraternity brother saying to me, "You could stand on the outside and complain about what you see all day long and yap about how they aren't doing this, that, and the third. But until you have membership, you are not changing anything." So I'll say this to Mitch McConnell, that the fear of, well, what happens when the GOP regains power? You are giving them power by not using yours in this moment. So you won't, like the narrative of becoming another Mitch McConnell, it won't even matter if you don't do anything in this moment.
Absolutely. I would love for all of our electeds to engage in lame duck president energy. Just move, push forward, push us through, and let's keep going because there is so much at stake. I wonder what would the timeline be if we were able to push Majority Leader Schumer to host a session to run up to actually push through a vote? What would the timeline be for that taking effect? And then what are the first 3 bills that you would advocate pushing through once we fire the filibuster?
A lot of people are saying that this has to happen before the August recess, that we have to get rid of the filibuster before the August recess and push through legislation. Definitely for the People Act. We have got to do everything that we can to protect voting rights in the United States from a federal position. We also have to get the George Floyd bill passed. We need criminal justice reform, and we need criminal justice reform immediately. And then lastly, the other piece of legislation that I would absolutely make sure that happens is DC statehood. There are 700,000 Black and brown people, essentially, that are disenfranchised and do not have representation in Congress because they do not have statehood. There are more people in Washington, D.C. than there are in the state of Wyoming. And your presentation, if you haven't seen the training, go back and watch the training, talks about the level of power that Wyoming has over places like California, Illinois, and definitely DC. So DC statehood.
Thank you so much for bringing up all of those democracy reform bills, because again, that is so close to my heart and the work that we're doing every day. And really, I do think it's important to uplift that race class analysis that we strive to bring to this work, because it's so necessary. Democracy being talked about in a silo is part of how we got here, right? Not engaging and interacting with those for whom democracy has long been deferred is how we continue to fail moving this work forward. I really, really appreciate you coming and just sharing your brilliance today. What are some takeaways that you want folks to have from this conversation, and how can folks plug in?
Absolutely. And thank you for your amazingness, your energy, and just everything that you are doing. I am so glad that I have another sister friend in the world of democracy reform now. Again, major takeaways: have the conversation. Do not be afraid of the filibuster because you think you're not a policy wonk. The Demos Just Democracy and Truth and Conciliation brief that we did will help you have this conversation with your barber. Have the conversation. People need to know how it's impacting our everyday lives. Secondly, make sure you are applying that pressure to your representatives in Congress, both the House and the Senate. We also, and when I say the House and the Senate, yes, it's a Senate issue, but we need House members to be pressuring their colleagues and saying, look, you don't get that. Like, I show up to work, I have to vote on bills. You need to vote on bills, you know? So definitely engage your representatives in both the House and the Senate. And then lastly, plug into the work that Democracy Initiative is doing. Come back for training. Bring your friends for training. Bring your moms and dads to the trainings. Make sure that you're signing the petitions that are circulating. So again, these representatives, these senators know that this is not just a small piece of America asking for this. There are millions of us asking to fire the filibuster. And then plug into the work of these organizations every day. You can find us at truthandconciliation.org. Again, plug into Demos, plug into Just Democracy, Democracy Initiative, all of these wonderful organizations, Moms Rising, and help us do this work.
Thank you so much, Reverend Dr. Spalding. This has been such a phenomenal day that I've got to spend with you. I am honored, and I appreciate what you bring to this work. It's so important to engage authentically folks who don't get to participate and don't feel welcome into the democracy space, because democracy is for all of us, right? I look forward to working with you and moving this forward and firing the filibuster this year, because I know we can do it, y'all. There are many of us and few of them. So stay in touch with all of us. Reach out if you're interested in more training. We're happy to teach you if you are comfortable with having those conversations. That's what I do all day. So reach out and stay engaged. Remember that this fight is not just for any group of us. It's for us to really make sure that as we move forward, we have what I like to call a FUBU democracy, a for us, by us democracy, because the one that is documented in the Constitution excludes the majority of Americans today. And so remember, keep in mind, HR 1, HR 4, HR 51, and let's get some liberation and justice for all this year, y'all. Thanks for participating today, and enjoy the rest of your day.